Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inspired and Empowered Living TV show and podcast for a thriving life and business. We are live on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern on talk4tv.com, w4wn.com, and my YouTube channel. And today we are going to continue our series on creating thriving relationships in life and business. And today we'll be talking about recognizing those red flags and breaking those unhealthy relationship patterns. You don't end up in unhealthy relationships because you want to. You end up there because you're missing the early warning signs or repeating familiar patterns. In this episode, we'll explore how to recognize red flags sooner, trusting your intuition, and learn how to shift towards healthier, more empowering relationships in both your personal life and your business. And so last couple of weeks, the first week in the series, we talked about the foundation of thriving relationships. And the most important foundation is the relationship with yourself, because every relationship you have depends on you and how you are in those relationships. In part 2, we explored healthy communication and boundaries. And again, today we're taking the next step, recognizing the red flags and breaking unhealthy relationship patterns. And have you ever ignored a red flag and then later wished you had trusted your instincts? Have you ever noticed similar patterns repeating in your relationships, in your friendships, with your clients, or with your colleagues? Do you sometimes feel something is off, but you can't quite explain why? Many unhealthy relationships don't begin with obvious problems. They begin with subtle warning signs that you may overlook or dismiss. And so we are going deeper into this today. And before we jump into today's show, let's do I want to talk about the question that was unanswered last week's show from Anastasia. We were talking about timeouts and taking time out in your relationships when you need to process something and you need a break or a timeout. Because if you are in an emotional state that is overwhelming, or you're really angry, or you're really fearful, or you're very emotional in some way, you will not be able to really have that healthy conversation until you take time for yourself, you pause, And then you can then come back and have that healthy conversation. So Anastasia asked, how long is an acceptable pause? So an acceptable pause, it really depends on you, because you can, if you can process through what you need to in order to have that healthy conversation more quickly, then great, do that. But sometimes you may need to take a little longer. Sometimes you may need a few days, a week, a couple of weeks in order for you to process through what you need to. Because the bottom line is, in your relationships, when you're in a current relationship, you can get triggered, and that trigger is coming from your past. Now, if it's something that you process through, you may be able to process through it more quickly so that you can have the healthy conversation more quickly. But if this is the first time you're exploring the issue, or you need to go deeper and there's a lot of emotions coming up for you, you may need more time to process. So bottom line is, it's about taking the time you need to in order to process so that you can have that healthy conversation. Now, ideally, you don't want to take months or years, although I will tell you, it depends on the relationship. If it's a really toxic relationship, you may need more time. But if it's a relationship that you really care about and you want to resolve this, then you want to do it obviously more quickly. So that's what I say about the acceptable pause. So let's jump into today's topic. And let's talk, what is a red flag? Okay, so I'm talking about red flags. I want to define it so that you can really understand what I mean by that, and we're all on the same page. A red flag is a warning sign, an early warning sign that something may not be healthy, respectful, or aligned in your relationship. Red flags can appear in your personal relationships, in your friendships, in your business partnerships, and in your client relationships. So it's really important to notice the red flags, because the sooner you notice the red flag, then you can start taking an action that will support you in being able to take to take an action that you need to take. And I call it an inspired action because it's an action based on your intuition. So common red flags is a lack of respect for your boundaries. If you say to somebody, whether it is in a personal relationship or a professional relationship, and you say, I need to take a break, or I need a few minutes, or I like we were talking about, I need some time to regroup before we can have this healthy conversation. And that healthy conversation could be in your personal life or in your business. You're going to want someone to respect your boundary. Now, if they come back like, when are you ready? Or if you, how long is this going to take you? And they say it in a tone. And again, I also say that usually you want to be able to communicate by telephone or in person. But if someone you know is not respecting your boundaries and you're concerned, then you may just say, and don't say a lot, just say, I need some time, or I need a few days, or whatever it is for that boundary. And with texting and emailing, it's really important to keep it short, to the point. Don't put in a lot of information. And if you can avoid texting and email, then I support you in doing that, because emails and texts can get read wrong. When you're on the phone, or when you're on the phone, or when you're in person, people can more feel into what you're feeling or what's going on for you. Again, if you're totally in emotional trigger, then it may be better to do it briefly through a text or an email. So just saying possibilities to help you with those. Yes, Misty says tone and inflection needs to be listened to. And that is so true, because when you hear that tone or the inflection, it gives you a clue what's going on with the other person, or have the other person know what's going on with you. Very important. So another red flag is anyone who's trying to manipulate you or guilt trip. If they're giving you a guilt trip, that is a red flag. That's not okay. It's not respectful and harmful to you. If there is consistent criticism or belittling of your of you, of your time, of your energy, of your boundaries, if there is any criticism, or not any, because there is constructive criticism, and it all depends on how someone says what they're saying. But if it's energetically, like, energetically, but here's the thing, with a text and an email, you don't always know. But intuitively, if you hear somebody, there's that tone and inflection, you know that there's criticism or belittling. Trust that. That's your intuition talking to you. If there's any kind of dishonesty or secrecy in the relationship, whether it's personal or professional, that's a big red flag. Big red flag. If there's controlling behavior, so if they're trying to control you in any way, shape, or form, definitely red flag. And then emotional volatility. So if, like what I was talking about last week with the anger and raging, that's emotional volatility. So if somebody is yelling, screaming at you, or digging, like there's digging, that's that criticism or belittling, and it can be like this subtle level. Sometimes it's very outright, and sometimes it's more subtle. And I will tell you, sarcasm is anger, and it's anger that can be directed at you and can be belittling or critical. And that is something for all of you to look for, because it's not healthy, and it's not good. And if somebody says, "Oh, I was only kidding," in every joke, there is truth. There is truth, some truth in terms of when someone is, and I'm talking about specifically when someone is being sarcastic. Red flags often appear early, but what happens is often you'll rationalize them away. So an example of this is somebody you may dismiss disrespectful behavior. Somebody is being disrespectful, and they say to you, and you say to yourself, well, they're just having a bad day, or maybe I misunderstood. But it's really important to start really noticing, becoming aware of the red flags, and starting to trust your intuition. If something is off, then you know it's it's something, it's a flag, it's a red flag for you. Mickey says, text. The person reading feels what they feel in person. Text. The person reading feels what they feel. In person, you can see their reaction and clarify your intent. Yes. Exactly, Nikki. Exactly. So when you're reading a text, how you feel or how you feel about the person makes all the difference. In an in-person situation, you can see what's going on. You can see your reaction, they can see your reaction, and you can clarify your intent. So it's really important to have that, to be able to have that. Yes, very important. That's why it's so different. So let's talk about why people repeat relationship patterns. And I'm going to go into this briefly, but I will tell you, I am going to go deeper into this because this is really important. And so let's start touching upon it. And like I said, next show, we're going to go deeper into those repeating relationship patterns. So, repeating unhealthy dynamics is very common and is most of the time unconscious on your part. Because if you became aware and noticed, and I'll give you an example. So Sophie is a client that I've worked with, and she came into to work with me. And the dynamic for her and the relationship she was in was that she definitely was talk about belittling and that controlling and so the person that she was with, I'll call that person Sean. And so she was in this relationship with Sean, and Sean would be demeaning to her, would belittle her, would be, oh, the sarcasm that I was talking about, sarcastic. And and so what happened was Sophie would be like, no, no problem, oh, he doesn't really mean it, or no, that's not really happening, or like she would totally dismiss her feelings, like she knew something was off, but she wasn't trusting herself. And what happened is that familiarity, that this was a pattern that had been repeated in other relationships that she had. And also, she grew up with it in her family, her father and her mother, but her father was critical and emotionally distant. Her mother was inconsistent. And so the relationships that she drew to her were those kinds of dynamics that felt normal to her. And she came to me because she knew something was off, but she didn't know how to, she wasn't trusting herself enough, and she didn't know how to stop it. And so we worked on it. So another issue is the unresolved wounds. And sometimes people unconsciously, you try to fix past experiences through new relationships, hoping that this time the outcome will be different. But I will tell you that if you have not worked on that pattern and worked on resolving the pattern, that pattern will continue. And then you may have low self-worth, because when Sophie came to me, she did not feel good about herself at all. And she doubted herself, she doubted her value, she tolerated behavior that was disrespectful, didn't reflect love, and she didn't get the respect that she really deserves. But we needed to work on her valuing herself, her her ability to love herself more and to have that new level of self-worth. And then another way that you would repeat the pattern is the people pleasing. Many of you may be so heart centered, you prioritize harmony, you want to avoid conflict, even at your own expense. And then what happens over time, this can lead to unbalanced relationships. And so that's why it's so important to start seeing those red flags and to do the work that needs to. And like I said, we're going to go deeper into that next week. So let's talk about the role of intuition, because your intuition is your guidepost. Your intuition is that ding, 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 the bell ringing. But if you're ignoring your intuition, then what happens is you're not giving yourself the opportunity and the trusting yourself to do what you need to do to take care of you. So signs your intuition is noticing something. So if you're in a relationship, and again, this could be personal, this could be professional in any way, shape, or form, whether it's with a client, a colleague. And here's the thing, as an entrepreneur, you want to find colleagues that feel respectful, that will work with you, not to undermine you. I've heard of situations where you think that somebody is a good fit for you, and then what happens is you start to see their true colors. So if you notice the signs early, and here's the thing, one of my mentors, she says, date your potential partners, meaning I'm talking about in business. Like if you want to do some kind of group or some kind of partnership with them, date them first, just like you would in a romantic relationship. So really important, because finding those red flags and tuning into your intuition is really crucial in any partnership, any friendship, any personal or professional relationship. So if you have a persistent feeling that something isn't right, but you don't know what it is yet, listen to it. If you start feeling emotional discomfort around someone's behavior, if they're saying something, like, for example, a lot of people disregard sarcasm. They say, "Oh, it's a joke," or "I'm only kidding." Or I've had clients like um, uh, Laura, and there would be like she would like beat herself up, and she would downplay and make fun of herself. And what happened is that she wasn't really regarding herself. Now, if someone is doing that to you, like in a sarcastic way, listen to that. That is a warning sign. If they're very sarcastic, my little hunch to tell you is they're probably very angry. They can be a very angry person. And what they do is they act out in maybe more subtle ways. They may not be screaming and yelling, but it's what we call passive aggressive behavior. But sarcasm is it's acting out. It's acting out behavior. What I call that acting out. So really important. And this is really an important piece too, if there's inconsistent words and actions, there's sometimes we call it mixed messages. Now, if they say something and then do something else, there's no consistency, or they make a promise and they don't follow through, and this happens time and time again. Or another one is time. They say they'll be there at such and such, and then they show up, or they don't show up. If they don't show up at all, unless they have an emergency excuse, something to be aware of. And if they show up 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, there's some really, you've got to look at what's going on. And your body is really here to support you in tuning in. Your body is one of the tools your intuition guides you to. So if you get a sense of tension or unease in your body, listen, there's something going on there. And you may override your intuition because you really want the relationship to work. Please don't. Don't override your intuition. Your intuition is your internal guidance system, and it's here to help you and protect you and support you. It's really important for you when something feels off. It's important for you to explore it, to look at it rather than ignore it. And ideally you want to be able to talk about it with someone else. I do something with friends where if something's feeling off and I'm not sure, we call it in a reality check. Like, I'd like to talk about this and I want to tune in and let's do a reality check. So I really want to support you. And I always am there for my clients, whether it's their personal or their business, to do those reality checks. Really important. So Anastasia says, how would a person know if they are seeing what needs to be seen? So the best way to say that is through the intuition. So if you're starting to feel something is off and you feeling uncomfortable, or you're getting a sense that something's off, something's not right, that's when you need to explore it. And then that's why being able to explore it with a coach, a counselor, a supportive friend can be really important when we're talking about relationships. And I mean all relationships. I really feel like sometimes we need support outside of ourselves in order to be able to attract, or to be able to get that feedback. Yes, something's off, or this may be something you need to explore because of your old patterns. So it's really interesting. There's this line between what's yours and what's theirs. And that's why you need to explore when something feels off or there's something going on for you. That's why you need to explore it. Now, you may be able to journal it. And I'm feeling blah, blah, blah about this relationship. What's really happening? Now, here's the thing, though. If this is a deep pattern, and again, we're going to go into more next week. is this is a deeper pattern on that subconscious level. You may not be able to always become aware, pinpoint it. And that's why it's really important to have another person to talk it through with. It can be really important, really helpful to help you move through the pattern, your pattern, and get really clear on the behavior, if this is really the behavior you're seeing or not. Now, here's the thing. Again, I want you to start. It's about learning to trust yourself. There's this level of a knowing within you that something's off, or something needs to be paid attention to, or something needs to be explored. And then it's about learning and understanding, is it your stuff or is it theirs? Now, I will tell you, whatever relationship you're in, whether I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So Tony was another client, and when we were working together, she was in this relationship with Ryan. And Ryan was in this relation, and then she was in this relationship, and she felt something was off. And she wasn't trusting herself that he was cheating on her. She kind of felt it. She had a sense, but she wasn't trusting herself. So as we worked together, she became aware that indeed she was right. He was cheating. And so there was a red flag, and she knew something was off. She felt it, but she wasn't trusting herself. And in this case, she was correct. Now, there are other times where, so let me finish this, because this is very interesting. So then we worked through her low self-esteem and the things she needed to work through. And she left that person, had an action plan, left Ryan, and started. And then a couple of years later, she was in another relationship, and we'll call him Mark. And Mark, what happened was she had the same fears again, and she was not sure whether it was her or her old self. And so as we explored it and as she went deeper, she began to get in touch with her intuition. And this, in the case with Mark, she was the one that was off. He wasn't cheating on her. He was being faithful, but she didn't trust herself. And she was still in that old pattern of not trusting. And so we worked on it, and she was able to come to a place where she realized, oh, okay, he really isn't. And she was able to move on. So that is an example of what can happen in your relationships. And now you can apply this to whether you're doing in your personal life or your professional life. So, practical steps to break those unhealthy patterns. The first thing that you want to do is to increase the awareness in yourself. You need to pay attention to repeating dynamics and ask yourself, what patterns do I notice in my relationships? Another thing that you really need to do in all your relationships is strengthen your boundaries. The clearer your boundaries are. Now, if let's say you're a people pleaser, or if you have issue with being able to set healthy boundaries, that needs to be worked on. That is crucial, because whether you're in personal or professional life, you need healthy boundaries. And healthy boundaries create safety and clarity. And they also help you to protect your emotional energy and well being. You need to trust your intuition. When something feels off or misaligned, it's really important to reflect on what's going on before moving forward and exploring it and being able to check in to see what feels right and what doesn't. And healthy relationships, this is about choosing alignment, choosing healthy relationships that are built on mutual respect, honesty, and emotional safety. And you deserve relationships in your personal and business life that will support your growth rather than drain your energy. I've had clients say to me, "Oh, this client drains my energy." And that's why when I'm working with my clients, I help my clients be able to tap into their soul aligned clients so that you feel lit up when you're working with them. That's what it feels like for me, and I love it. So, really, all of this is so important, so crucial. Mickey asks, how can you tell if it's past, relived, or actual current time? Okay, so Mickey, I want to answer that question more fully. So next week, we're going to go deeper into that, how you can tell if it's relived or actual current time. And I will definitely answer that question next week. So thank you for that question. Really, all of your questions are so appreciated, and your comments, appreciate you. So, really knowing that thriving relationships are not about perfection, they're about progress. They're about being able to know that all your relationships are about growth. You want growth oriented relationships. You want your relationships to be about awareness, and it's about you choosing connections that honor your well being. And when you recognize red flags earlier, this is about trusting your intuition, shifting out of those unhealthy patterns, which we're going to talk about more next week, and opening the door to relationships that are supportive, joyful, and empowering. And I invite you to reflect on this question over the next week. Until next week, where in my life am I being invited to trust my intuition more deeply in my relationships? So, really invite you to think about that. And then I invite you to think about some relationship patterns. And have you ever wondered why the same relationship patterns keep showing up in your life? And then have you ever asked yourself, why do I keep attracting the same kinds of people? So maybe these people are showing up in your romantic relationships or your friendships or clients or colleagues. You think you've learned the lesson. You promised yourself things will be different, and yet somehow the pattern repeats. So next week, we are going to go deeper diving into why you repeat the same relationship patterns and explore relationship patterns and why they're deep in the subconscious, how your early experiences can attract later in life, and how you can break the cycle and create healthier relationships. So join me next week for the hidden psychology behind repeating relationship patterns in your life and business. And we are live on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. Join us to ask your questions or put your comments in the chat. And we are on the podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, Apple, Amazon, and many more 24/7. And so I wish you an inspired and empowered day, night, and week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye for now.